Well, it's Tuesday. That means it's time for Digital Natives here on Classic Business, where we look at the latest advancements in tech and its impact on the world. And obviously, everyone's still talking about that CrowdStrike outage on Friday. It caused a ruckus around the globe. We experienced some impacts, Capitec and I think SAA and a few others. But in the main, an article published in IT Web today reckoned that after surveying quite a few CIOs that we managed to avoid the worst of it, but it does certainly expose how vulnerable the global system is to a single point of failure. I'm joined now by Johan Steyn, founder of AI4Business.net. Johan, what was your first thought when you learned about this disruption caused by CrowdStrike's update? Did you foresee such a ripple effect from a single software patch?
Michael, I didn't see it coming, and one would think that in this advanced age of technology, that it would not happen. I spent a lot of my career in testing software systems. It's so fundamental to test it before you release it. And to think that this $80 billion company released a patch that would ruin the world economy, did not properly test it, was astounding. But initially I thought, this is just another story. It won't be a big thing, but I was very wrong.
What actually happened with this CrowdStrike update?
Yeah, they've got a platform that they call Falcon, which is an AI-driven platform that detects security breaches, penetration breaches into large corporates. I think their customers are quite large. You need about 1,000 licenses at minimum to sign up. And, like with our own laptops and iPads, we have regular software updates, security updates, and so forth. So they released a fairly regular low impact update, but they didn't test it and something went wrong in the software code, which then with the interaction with the Windows operating system, especially on PCs, caused this blue screen it caused essentially an architectural problem in the software of computers. And because they serve, I think, about more than half of the Fortune 1000 organizations across the world, it had an impact across businesses, especially banking, but also scarily with 911 calls in hospitals and the like. So it's a software update that just automatically updates on your system. And this large organization didn't test it properly. Now, it's a human error. It's not even a technological challenge. And it shows you, I think, Michael, that no matter how smart our robots and our AI systems will become in the future, we humans still mess it up. Yeah. And to mitigate that risk is not a technological conversation as such.
It's more a human conversation, absolutely. Yeah. And what concerned me, I recall on Friday morning presenting at a conference in Umhlanga, was the impact on the airline industry. And I saw several airlines in the US were grounded. And, if you start to impact with passenger safety, one of the conference speakers actually arrived and because of the outage, couldn't use her credit card on her Uber app. So she frantically phoned her husband and said, "What have you done with the credit cards?" But it just shows you how interconnected everything is at the end of the day. Primarily, what was the biggest impact that you saw around the world from this?
I think, Michael, in the financial services space, a lot of banks like Allianz and others, stock exchanges as well. But more worryingly is the likes of hospitals not being able to send out ambulances. I mean, it's one thing, as painful as it is, that I can't access my finances for a few hours. But if I urgently need an ambulance and the hospital can't send it because of a software problem, that's the real worry. I think across the world, luckily not so much in South Africa as you mentioned, it had a huge effect on financial markets. The worry is, what is next? Can such a small failure impact us again in the next few days or in the future? And can it ground us to an hold for months to come, potentially?
CrowdStrike CEO assured that it wasn't a security breach, and as you said, it was human error. But the question for me is whether or not there shouldn't be more stringent accountability for tech companies that handle such critical updates affecting millions of users.
Absolutely. Now, the problem is we as consumers or even large corporates have no control over that. We trust that these large global firms are responsible and professional, and for the large part they are. one little error like this, one little human error, and it brings us to an halt. They should be held to account. There's very little legislation about that. Who's accountable for the damages? This all essentially came down to that CEO saying he's sorry, they've got it in hand. A lot more should be done. Imagine we can't buy any food for the next month because the trucks don't arrive. The stock's not being delivered. Can you imagine the societal chaos if basic services are not delivered across the world for weeks on end because of software errors? So we need to take it so much more seriously. And you mentioned our interconnected world, Michael, and that's exactly where the problem is. All of these systems work together one way or another. One little error and the whole system comes to a halt, and that is a huge concern for our future.
And I think customers are clearly unhappy, and rightfully, justifiably, I think they should be. It's been called one of the most significant IT outages, even rivaling what we expected to happen around Y2K, if listeners will remember that, which was really a damn squib. But if you look at it, I mean, if companies were to go elsewhere to other alternate cybersecurity providers, and if there are cyber attacks, that might be even worse. So, obviously you've got damaged trust here. What can be done to rebuild trust, and what steps can be taken to prevent similar incidents from happening in the future?
Look, I think it's always a danger if there's one dominant player in the field, in any field really, and that most organizations use that one provider's service. Now, CrowdStrike does have a number of competitors, but if I'm a large bank or a large corporate organization, and as I think our South African businesses are doing, which is why they haven't seen the real consequence of this, is to spread your risk across a number of these providers. But there's very little that we as customers can do in dictating how they do their software upgrades. So I think it's spreading your risk, but also to make sure that internally you have the right kind of security and alert systems. I worked for a big bank a few years ago, Michael, and then this is about 10 years ago. And back then we had about 800 penetration attacks and cyber attacks in the bank. And these are like state-sponsored size kind of attacks. I don't even know what the numbers would be today.
Wow.
The point is you can't just rely on your provider. You have to put the security measures in place in your own business, and you have to have measures in place from a communication point of view, a recovery, a redundancy point of view, when something like this goes wrong. This can cripple so in South Africa, imagine our banks were offline for a week around payday, the chaos that it would cause. But I do think that our internal structures, our banking system is quite mature and would probably survive these kind of attacks into the future.
And I think if anything as well, it's raising the issue that you just raised of redundancies and also of cybersecurity. So inside an organization now, if you've seen what could go wrong and it's simple human error, you really need to be thinking long and hard about these issues internally to say, what are your plans? What if something like this were to happen again? From a regulatory or kind of oversight perspective, do you think there should be increased oversight over vendors in the wake of this event, especially such critical cybersecurity vendors like CrowdStrike?
I fully think that we should do that, Michael. Remember, the idea of regulation is to protect people. If I can't buy food, if I can't take my child to hospital, if I can't make the payments I need to make, I need to be protected as a consumer in the business, and that's where the regulatory bodies come in, protecting me. I do wonder if the regulatory bodies fully understand this kind of technology and the potential consequences. Now, we don't want to over-regulate it. It's the same conversation you and I have had about AI regulation. But there must be some sort of a protection. And my question is just, if something goes wrong, which it will happen in software, how quickly can we bring it back online?
Yeah.
And to what extent do we as a geographical area, as a country, as a sovereign state, need control over these things rather than just outsourcing it to the so-called global north? I think that's where the debate should really start.
Absolutely. Johan Steyn, founder of AI4Business.net, thank you very much. Great perspectives into the implications of the recent CrowdStrike incident and really the broader issue of technology reliance and cybersecurity. Lots to think about for policymakers and regulators and business leaders in the wake of that CrowdStrike patch issue that struck the world last week. You're listening to Classic Business.
Classic Business with Michael Avery, sponsored by Alex Forbes, for insight, advice, and impact.